SB 1600, an act amending sections 36-2161 and 36-2301, Arizona Revised Statutes relating to abortion. The Committee on Rules recommends the following bills are proper for consideration. SB 1600, signed Warren Peterson, Chairman. Mr. President, your Committee on Health and Human Services, having had under consideration SB 1600 relating to infants born alive requirements, submits the following report. Your committee recommends the bill do pass. Signed, T.J. Shope, Chairman.
All right, very good. Thank you. The chair calls on Senator Shamp. Move your bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it recommends SB 1600 do pass.
Okay. All right. Chair calls on Senator Birch. Comment or a question, ma'am? Hold on, we'll get it going. There you go.
Thank you. Just a comment, if I may.
You may make a comment. Just go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. So my concern with this legislation is that it applies to pre-viable babies. And there's not really a clear medical definition on what that means. But generally speaking, any baby that's born alive at 25 weeks or later is considered to be, viable in the sense that if it's healthy, then we should do everything that we can to make sure that baby gets the medical care that it needs. But there is no chance of any baby surviving less than 23 weeks. So any mandatory medical intervention is, in my perspective, condoning what is torture at that point, and is inhumane to both the baby and to the family, requiring a medical professional to provide life-saving and sometimes painful interventions when a life cannot be saved. It's not medicine. It's torture and it's experimentation. And my concern is that when a mother is losing a pregnancy, that this is a very difficult time for a woman, and that if I had been further along myself, and if I had a baby that was 18 weeks, 19 weeks, 20 weeks, that I delivered in the hospital, and that baby was born alive, a medical team springing into action to do medical intervention instead of me being allowed to hold my baby while it dies, and instead of allowing for comfort care and for all of the other options that are available and appropriate, that's my concern. I agree in spirit with any legislation that supports medical intervention for viable babies, but for pre-viable deliveries, there is no medical reason to do that, and I discourage anyone from supporting this legislation as it's written. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Birch. Okay, seeing no further discussion, Senator Hernandez, you're on the board. Question or a comment, ma'am?
Question.
A question for the
Sponsor.
sponsor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will the sponsor year for a question?
All right, I'll ask that question. Go ahead. Just hold on with the question a minute. Senator Shamp, do you yield for a question from Senator Hernandez?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I yield to a question.
You may go ahead through the chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for the sponsor is, why would this policy or this piece of legislation be necessary in these cases, as we've heard from our senator from District 9, that these are not viable life?
Senator Shamp, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this bill specifically states medically appropriate and reasonable care. It is not reasonable to think that a 15-week-old baby can survive. So medically appropriate and reasonable care would be simple comfort care. There are cases where a 23-week baby survived. The advances in technology are incredible. And we need to make sure that we give the parents that option. We need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to save a life.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Another question for the sponsor? Hold on. Do you yield for another question?
Mr. Chairman, I do.
Certainly. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, why are we looking to legislate medical health decisions that should be left between the pregnant person and their doctor?
Senator Shamp, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, as a nurse, I will always stand to protect those who cannot protect themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, very good. All right, seeing no further discussion. Question before you, members. Senate Bill 1600 receive a due pass recommendation. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it, do have it, so ordered.
Senate Bill 1600, an act amending sections 36-2161 and 36-2301, Arizona Revised Statutes relating to abortion.
As you've heard the third reading, Senate Bill 1600. Those in favor of the measure will vote aye. Those opposed vote no. System's now open. Senate will now proceed to vote. Madam Minority Leader.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. I rise to explain my vote on SB 1600.
Please.
Thank you. Members, this bill would impede families from making significant quality of life decisions, such as being able to provide comfort or spiritual care in tragic and painful situations. This is incredibly difficult medical decisions should be made by patients and consultations. Is it me? Hello. Mr. President Pro Tem, thank you. Okay, there we go. I'll start over, but this bill would impede families from making significant quality of life decisions, such as being able to provide comfort or spiritual care in tragic and painful situations. This is incredibly, these are incredibly difficult medical decisions that should be made by patients in consultation with their physicians and without any external interference. Instead, what happens with this bill, it takes the decisions of making decision-making out of the hands of families in crisis and limits the freedom of patients to make the decisions that are right for them, for their family. SB 1600 would impact tragic and often unexpected medical situations that arise in the hospital settings where delivery of neonatal occurs in situations or at or are incapable of sustained life. In these situations, the expertise of doctors are incredibly important. And again, we want to make sure that families are able to make their decisions that benefit, that impact their lives. This is cruel, and it's a misguided attempt to interfere with evidence-based medical decisions, making it between patients and their physicians. This bill is not based in science or medicine. It is meant to incite emotions. With that, I vote no.
No. Have you all voted? Senator Birch.
Thank you. I rise to explain my vote.
Please.
So my concerns about the language in this bill are significant. I just think it's also important to mention that the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which is the authoritative body in this area of medicine, is also against this. I've had multiple letters from neonatologists coming to me as well in opposition here, which tells me that whether or not the intent is that the medical treatment would need to be appropriate for this situation, the medical community is concerned that they're going to be penalized for doing what they might think is the right thing in the moment. And it specifically states that it prohibits a health professional from depriving any born alive infant of medically appropriate and reasonable medical care or treatment, regardless of whether the infant is likely to survive. And to say that the treatment has to be appropriate, but that you have to do it even if they're unlikely to survive, it contradicts itself, and I think this language is dangerous. I think it's the wrong thing, and I vote no.
Senator Birch votes no. Senator Bennett?
Mr. Pro Tem, I'd like to explain my vote.
Please.
I have a daughter who is a labor and delivery nurse. Sorry, this is going to get emotional. And 3 or 4 days a week, she goes home, having dealt with some of the most difficult situations I'd never want to have to deal with. And her mother or I usually get a call every night about 8 o'clock. And we find out how her day went. And she's been doing this for 15 years. 13 here in Arizona and last couple up in Utah. And somehow she has, in both places where she's worked, kind of become the nurse that deals with infant demises. And the stories I hear about break my heart, and oftentimes I don't have a very good, well, I'll say it this way. The times I most feel inadequate as a father are on these phone calls, because I don't know what to say to my daughter. And I'm concerned whether this bill strikes the balance that is so difficult. As our good colleague from District 9 has reminded us today, these decisions are just gut-wrenching. And to hear my daughter talk about going to a morgue and getting the body of the baby and taking it to the mother and warming it up so that they can enjoy a few minutes, or using a Q-tip to depress the fingers and the toes into the plaster of Paris, or cut off a lock of hair. I don't know how some of our health professionals do this every day. And so I am very compelled by the concerns expressed. And no one is more pro-life than I am, but no one is also more aware, because of these phone calls I have several times a week, of how the policies we set here really impact the lives of those we love. And I get concerned when I read paragraphs in this bill about health professionals' licenses being at risk and penalties and all kinds of things if they don't make the right decisions. And so I'm going to support this bill today, but I'm not sure we have the correct balance, maybe quite yet. Because if these issues of life come down on party line votes, I don't think we have found that balance. And I know that my child would never make a decision in a room with parents. Sometimes parents, sometimes it's just a mother that she didn't feel was in the best interest of the child and the family. So I get very concerned about elements of a bill that I signed onto. And I'm going to vote yes today, but I'm going to continue to work to see if we can find the balance that I think we owe the people who have to do unthinkable and almost unbearable jobs every day for the most vulnerable. And I'll vote aye.
Senator Bennett votes aye. Senator Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I rise to explain my vote.
Please.
Thank you for that testimony, Senator. Even if you would have hit the red button, you're still pro-life. And with that, my point to that is, you know, I served 4 years in the House and 4 years in the Senate. And this little green button for 8 years has defined me as a pro-life Democrat. For 8 years, that green button controlled my votes as a pro-life Democrat. Then I took 4 years off, and I got to reflect and revisit some things. I got to visit what I did, what I didn't do, and what I still need to do. And I realized, being home for 4 years and through that reflection, the hypocrisy that I was involved in, the hypocrite that I was for those 8 years. And I say that because, you know, what are we doing with that child after it's born? I didn't do much. The senator spoke in the committee of the whole of her experience. And that's a real experience. And do you think that if there was tools to save that baby, you think that she wouldn't have insisted? She's a mother. We all would have. I'm sorry. And I'm a pro-life woman. I'll always be a pro-life woman. The clarity that I received is that these are difficult decisions. And, you know, growing up, my father always told me, babe, from the womb to the tomb. When I was young, I didn't understand what that was. It is truly from the womb to the tomb. And as a pro-life woman that I am, you're going to see me in action being pro-life. In action. I have tons of paperwork right here trying to save homeless people. These are the babies that we're claiming that we're saving. That's why I came back. Because I'm a pro-life person trying to take care of people that are dying. My father was right. It is about being from the womb to the tomb. So I am not going to allow this little green button to define me anymore. And with that, I vote no.
Senator Miranda votes no. Senator Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I guess I should air my perspective on this. It's kind of interesting that at one point this section dealt with just abortion, but now under the current rewritten section, it applies to any infant born alive, which I assume would be abortion or in a non-abortion situation. All the bill actually requires is that the infant born alive be given medically appropriate and reasonable care and treatment to preserve the life. So I don't think this bill would apply in a non-abortion situation or have an effect that different from today in a non-abortion situation, because obviously if it was a non-abortion situation, the child was welcomed, then if there was a problem, obviously the parents and everybody would immediately jump in to give medically appropriate and reasonable care to save the life of that person. Because remember, once born, it's no longer fetus. Once born, the abortion issue is history. Once born, this is a human being. So what we're talking about is how this is applied in the situation of a fetus brought into an abortion clinic to be terminated, and it didn't work out that way. So instead, the fetus was born alive and therefore is no longer a fetus subject to abortion, but is a human being who happens to be possibly dying inside an abortion clinic. And all this says is that this human being has to get reasonable and appropriate medical care to save the life. It's not an abortion, it's not an aborted fetus. The abortion procedure is finished. The abortion procedure failed. And there's now a human being on a table who needs medical care to live. It's pretty easy for me. I'm a yes.
Senator Kavanaugh votes aye. Senator Kern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Just want to really quick explain my vote. I want to thank Senator Shamp for sponsoring this bill. A lot of times in this chamber, I used to be in the House for 6 years, and a lot of people, there's always confusion on this issue, and I hear, I hear the prayers open up every day, and a lot of people pray in the name of Jesus. So, the confusion I believe begins because we have lost our way, not only as a nation, but as a state. So I believe that I think we should go back to what the originator of life says, who I believe is Jesus, who we pray a lot in that name. And I think we should look at what he says about life. Now, every story here is heartbreaking, heart-wrenching. I personally come from a family of 13 brothers and sisters, same mom and dad in central Minnesota. And we didn't have everything, but they definitely gave us life. But I want to go back to what the originator says, the author and the finisher of life, and just read a couple statements. In Job 31:15, it says, "Did not he that made me in the womb make him? And did not one fashion us in the womb?" Psalm 127:3 says, "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward." And the best one of all is Jeremiah 1:5. "Before I formed thee in thy belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee." So I don't think anywhere in the Bible that I read there's any mention of abortion the way we describe it today. And I firmly believe that because we have lost our way as a nation, this is a very divisive issue when it really shouldn't be. I fully support this bill, and I fully support the author of life and the giver of life, and with that I vote aye.
Senator Kern votes aye. Senator Hernandez.
Mr. President Pro Temp, I'd like to explain my vote.
Please.
Thank you. I would disagree that we have zero confusion here. We're here to write policy, but the one area we should not be writing legislation around is any policy that has to do with reproductive health care. That should not be something that we're looking to regulate via law and via policies written here. We should be here to write policies to help people. And this bill does not help anybody. Regardless of what any of our political ideologies or political stances or on what side of the aisle we sit on, reproductive health care should not be legislated by any member of this chamber. And with that, I vote no.
Senator Hernandez votes no. Senator Shamp.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. I'd like to explain my vote.
Please.
This isn't about emotion. This isn't about reproductive health. This is about life. Spiritual and comfort care is medically appropriate and reasonable care. Every baby that is born alive deserves a chance to live. It doesn't matter if her expected lifespan or how a doctor views her quality of life. Neither of those things matter. What matters is that she was born into this world alive and vulnerable. Nicole Sestaro testified to the anguish she endures living with the suspicion that her daughter, Lorelei, wasn't given that chance. Lorelei was born with trisomy 18, and she had beaten the odds and was thriving in her first week of life. Nicole and her fiance, John Stone, believe that the healthcare professionals slow-coded Lorelei because they didn't expect her to live long. A slow code is basically failing to provide the medical care needed to save or protect a baby's life. It's the care that all babies who are expected to live longer receive. It should be the care that all babies receive, because death by neglect is not medical care. Senate Bill 1600 ensures that all babies born into this state receive the care that they deserve. It requires healthcare workers not to pick who lives and who dies, not to pick winners and losers, but to actually provide medically appropriate and reasonable care to all babies born alive. A local OBGYN testified to the fact that doctors can be wrong in their prognosis. He was wrong when he didn't expect a baby to survive an emergency delivery, but with expert neonatology care, the baby survived. Healthcare professionals saved both lives, the mothers and the babies. And I would argue that everyone deserves that same chance. Arizona law says, yes, it requires all state laws to be interpreted to value all human life. SB 1600 is consistent with the current law. It is compassionate. It is just. And as it should, it requires a high standard to prove, requiring an intentional violation of the law. Parents are the ones who should choose to opt out of further care beyond what is medically appropriate and reasonable. Whether it's at the beginning or at the end of life, I will always stand and speak for those who can't. And with that, I vote aye.
Senator Shamp votes aye. System is now closed. Secretary record the vote by a vote of 16 ayes, 13 nays, 1 not voting. You've passed Senate Bill 1600. Sign in open session. Secretary is instructed to record the action, transmit the bill to the House.